Our former health minister, William Kize, resigned because of it, and now we have 7 senior health department officials who are suspended in the fallout of the Digital Vibes scandal. These include the department's Director General, Sandile Buthelezi, and former acting DG, Anban Pillay. But so often with these types of corruption cases, the suspensions happen, we move on, and we don't hear much for a while. So what really happens during this period? Well, we've roped in labour law specialist Gavin Stansfield to explain to us how these processes work, and he's live with us now on Zoom. Thanks so much for joining us, Gavin. Precautionary suspension, what is that?
Morning, Annika. Precautionary suspension is where an employer has reason to believe that the employee has committed serious acts of misconduct. So the suspension is implemented, as the name suggests, as a precaution to prevent the employee from possibly interfering with further aspects of the investigation, possibly interfering with witnesses, trying to intimidate witnesses who may come and testify during the disciplinary inquiry, and or the possibility that the employee may commit acts of misconduct again of a similar nature. So the precautionary suspension is to remove the employee from the workplace, pending the outcome of either further investigation and or their disciplinary inquiry.
Gavin, this may be beyond your scope, but these health officials have only just been suspended with the outcome of the Digital Vibes report. Should they not have been suspended during the investigation so as not to interfere with witnesses or tamper with any evidence, for instance?
It depends, Annika. So as I've said, a requirement for the suspension is at least some form of prima facie evidence of wrongdoing. So if you do have that at the time, then of course it gives you a lawful basis to suspend the employees. If you don't, if you need to conduct a preliminary investigation before you can establish that prima facie misconduct, and that's what you need to do before a suspension would be regarded as substantively fair. So it depends on how much evidence was at the disposal of the department at the time when it commenced the investigation versus now.
People working in the public sector seem to get suspension with full pay. Is this discretionary or is it part of the suspension process?
Yeah, so it's not only the public sector, Annika. Any employee who is suspended, public or private, is entitled to full pay for the duration of their suspension. It's a legal requirement. It's a precautionary suspension, not a punitive one. So if the employer wishes to exercise its right to exclude the employee from the workplace, then it must continue to remunerate that employee for the full duration of the suspension. And as I've said, that's not only limited to public sector employees. That is indeed the legal position for all employees across the country.
And how reasonable is it for somebody to be placed on suspension? Is there some kind of test for a reasonable amount of time for someone to be in that position?
So many contracts of employment will govern that. So there may be an individual contract between the employer and the employee which says that an employee may only be placed on suspension for a limited number of days and or months. Sometimes it's regulated by collective agreement which will apply to a particular industry. Of course, the shorter the period of time, the better, because of course the employer is not utilizing the employee services, but you're still paying for that. So long periods of suspension are generally undesirable. They're inefficient, and as I said, in the public sector, they cost the taxpayer money. So what is reasonable, I suppose, is really dependent on all of the circumstances. But one would hope that a disciplinary process, if that is indeed to commence following a suspension, which you would think it would be, then a disciplinary process must be commenced as soon as possible after the suspension to limit the period of the suspension.
All right, thank you so much. As always, labour law specialist and attorney Gavin Stansfield, thank you so much for your time this morning.